Ma'am, you need to leave immediately. This bank doesn't serve your kind of clientele. That sentence echoed through the main lobby of First Dominion Bank, the central headquarters located in the financial heart of Houston, Texas. The speaker was a tall security guard, his hand already on his radio, ready to call for backup. Standing before him was a black woman, upright, composed, unfazed by the suspicious glances surrounding her. In her hand was a black Italian leather briefcase embossed with 3 letters JLS. They stood for Jacqueline L. Spencer, a name that many in Texas's financial world had heard before, though no one in this lobby seemed to recognize it today. 2:47 p.m. A scorching Tuesday afternoon. The marble floor reflected the glow from the soaring crystal chandeliers above. The bank's lavish interior resembled a museum, and Jacqueline walked in as though she belonged there. Her tailored charcoal coat, glossy leather heels, and the gold watch on her wrist were all unmistakable signs of a successful individual. But not everyone saw it that way, least of all Jessica, the young teller at the VIP counter. "Regular customer service is over there," Jessica said, emphasizing the word regular with a tinge of annoyance, as if Jacqueline had mistaken a Louis Vuitton store for a discount shoe outlet. "Thank you, but I'm here to speak with the private banking division," Jacqueline replied gently, without raising her voice. Jessica raised an eyebrow, her eyes filled with doubt. "Do you have an appointment, ma'am?" Jacqueline gave a faint smile, offering no answer. Real-life stories like this happen more often than we think. And it's precisely stories like this, the quiet injustices, the moments people of color are denied even where they belong, that remind us why justice, even delayed, deserves to be voiced. If you believe them, the right stories deserve to be told, please help us stay motivated to keep bringing you brave, emotional, and powerful narratives like this one by clicking like and subscribing to the channel. One small action, but it helps amplify a bigger truth. At a nearby desk, a young woman was working on her MacBook Live, streaming her daily life to over 40 Instagram Live followers. Her name was Tiffany Lee, a communications student interning at the Houston Chronicle, usually capturing everyday moments. But today, she was unintentionally documenting something far from ordinary. Jessica's discomfort quickly spread. She stood up and stepped into an adjacent office to call her supervisor. Not long after Bradley Knox, the assistant branch manager, appeared. A white man around 35, his dress shirt perfectly pressed, his side-parted hair styled as if he had just stepped out of a bank commercial photo shoot. "What's going on here?" Bradley asked loudly, deliberately projecting so other customers could hear. "Nothing at all," Jacqueline answered calmly. "I simply requested access to premium banking services." Bradley folded his arms, a smug grin on his face. "Are you sure you're in the right place? This area is for VIP clients. You're aware of that?" "Right." Tiffany glanced at her phone. The viewer count was surging from 47 to 126. Comments started pouring in. "This is 2025, not 1965, right? Keep filming. This is about to blow up." Jacqueline opened her briefcase and gently placed it on the marble counter. The subtle click of the latch sounded like a signal, the quiet prelude to a brewing battle. "Could you clarify the requirements for using these services?" she asked. Bradley scoffed. "We require clients to have assets over $250,000 and must be able to show proof of income, legal income, of course." A slight but sharp insinuation. Tiffany held her breath and adjusted her camera angle. Viewer count now at 352. Jacqueline glanced at her phone. Several missed calls. General counsel, board secretary, head of HR. It was now 2:52 p.m. The board meeting was scheduled to begin in 43 minutes on the 48th floor of this very building. "Mr. Knox," she said, her voice steady, her gaze calm, as if addressing an intern. "Yes," he replied. Nothing, she said, with a slight shake of her head. "Just curious about the procedures you mentioned." "We have to be cautious," Bradley continued, his voice growing louder. "We follow anti-money laundering protocols, and some people come in here trying to take advantage of the system. From a farther corner, a middle-aged woman named Patricia Moore, the regional manager, had approached. She looked as if she'd been called to handle the situation. Bradley quickly reported with exaggerated professionalism. She demanded access to our services without any verification documents. I'm explaining the policies. We have to comply with regulatory requirements. Patricia nodded, like a pre-programmed recording device. Jacqueline opened her wallet and calmly pulled out her documents. A sleek black Centurion Amex card shimmered under the lights. "This is my identification," she said, placing her driver's license on the counter. Tiffany zoomed in on her hand. Viewers 891. Comments. It's starting now. Did anyone notice that card? Total CEO vibes. Jacqueline had yet to reveal her identity, but everyone watching the live stream and those standing in that bank lobby were about to witness a turn of events no one saw coming. Patricia gave Jacqueline's driver's license only a quick glance, then promptly looked away, as if she had been interrupted from something far more important. We also require a bank statement employment verification and a written explanation for why you're requesting access to our premium banking services, Patricia said, her voice flat and mechanical, like a text-to-speech program. Jacqueline didn't react. She simply closed her wallet gently and placed it next to her briefcase. A corner of her parking slip peeked out, VIP Executive Garage, Level P1, an area reserved strictly for board members and senior executives. But clearly no one here cared to notice. Tiffany's live stream had now surpassed 200 viewers. The comments were boiling over. She's clearly someone important. Are these people blind or what? Share this stream to Twitter. People need to see this. Jacqueline spoke calmly. I understand your procedures. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just want to be served at my own bank. That sentence made Bradley burst out laughing, as if he'd just heard the most ridiculous thing of the day. Your bank? He repeated, drawing out each word. Ma'am, this is First Dominion Bank, one of the largest financial institutions in Texas. We serve real business people. And I know its history very well, Jacqueline replied, still calm, her voice unwavering. Patricia stepped in closer, her voice lowered but icy. We are trying to handle this politely, but if you cannot provide the necessary documents within the next few minutes, we'll have to ask you to leave. At the reception desk, a large screen showed a video call from the regional office. The face on the screen was Jason McAllen, the regional executive director monitoring the situation from the Dallas headquarters. What's going on? Jason asked, his voice cold as steel. This individual is requesting premium services, but has not provided sufficient information, Patricia responded crisply. She's being uncooperative. Jason nodded. As per protocol, if there's no verified legal business purpose, proceed with security measures. Bradley turned back to Jacqueline, a look of smugness spreading across his face. He had just received backing from higher up. 2 security guards began moving toward the front entrance. Tiffany caught sight of them and whispered, "This is about to blow up." Amid the tension, thick enough to snap, a voice rang out, frail yet commanding. "Sir," an elderly woman called across the lobby. "Perhaps you should check the client file before making judgments." It was Mrs. Ruth Langston, 78 years old, a longtime client of the bank. She stood up from the waiting area, leaning on a cane but holding herself tall. Her eyes fixed on Bradley with reproach. Bradley ignored her. He was savoring this moment of power, convinced it was the pinnacle of his career. "Ma'am," he said loudly, turning back to Jacqueline, "you have 5 minutes to present your documents. If not, security will escort you out." Jacqueline glanced at her phone. A new message had arrived. She skimmed it and typed a short reply. Code 7. Initiate immediately. She echoed Bradley's words, enunciating each one 5 minutes. Perfect. That's all I need. Tiffany trembled with excitement. Her screen now showed over 1-800 live viewers. Someone had just shared the stream on Twitter. The hashtag First Dominion Bank was climbing into the trending list in the Houston area. Other customers in the lobby had stopped all transactions. Some were visibly annoyed by the tension, but most especially the younger ones began quietly pulling out their phones to start recording. They sensed something big was about to unfold. Jacqueline stood still. She didn't walk, didn't speak, only rested her hand lightly on her briefcase. The crystal lighting glinted off the black leather, as if reminding the entire room that some things cannot be judged by appearances. It was now 58 p.m. "Mr. Knox," she said, her voice low but resonant, like a military commander. "I think you should refer to the Employee Handbook page 47, item number 3. Bradley frowned. "What's on page 47? "The section on customer service standards," Jacqueline answered. "Specifically the part requiring all staff to treat every customer with respect and dignity. I am respecting you." Bradley snapped back, but his voice was starting to crack. "Are you really?" Jacqueline asked, locking eyes with him. That question cut through the lobby like a blade. It didn't need to be loud. It was enough to stop everyone from breathing. Tiffany clutched her phone tighter. She could feel something was about to explode. "Security!" Bradley shouted, his face red. "Remove this woman from the bank immediately!" The two security guards took a few more steps forward, though their eyes now showed hesitation. Marcus Dean, head of security, had worked here for 18 years, and he stared at Jacqueline intently. Something wasn't right. Too calm. Too composed. And that look not the look of a con artist. Instagram Live viewership had now crossed 2,400. Yo, does anyone know who she is? That briefcase looks like something from the executive suite. Check it. She might actually be someone powerful. At that same moment, Mrs. Ruth slowly moved closer, cane in hand, but fire in her eyes. "Young man," she said to Bradley, "if my husband, who founded this bank's first branch, were still alive, he would be ashamed of how you're treating a customer like this." But Bradley still refused to stop. 3 minutes, he shouted. 3 minutes. Left, Jacqueline looked at him, then at her watch. Just then, a new message flashed on her phone. "Executive Response Team, ETA 5MN. Jacqueline gave a slight nod. 2 minutes, Bradley Knox shouted, as if orchestrating a takedown operation rather than conducting a customer service interaction. The atmosphere inside First Dominion Bank's grand lobby tightened, nearly suffocating with tension. Jacqueline L. Spencer did not move. She stood still like an ancient tree in a storm, her hand resting on the leather briefcase. Every breath she took was slow and controlled, every motion calculated. On Tiffany Lee's phone screen, the live stream had hit 3,182 viewers. Comments poured in non-stop. "She knows exactly what she's doing. This woman is not ordinary." "Great angle, Tiffany. Don't stop filming. Someone check the name on the briefcase. JLS, Google it. Now." At that moment, Jacqueline gently opened her briefcase. The sound was nearly imperceptible, yet every eye was locked on her movements. Inside were neatly arranged documents, a slim tablet, several cards, and one finely designed business card placed at the top. Without a word, she took the card, turned it face up, and slid it smoothly across the marble counter right in front of Bradley. Bradley glanced at it, but didn't bother picking it up. "Anyone can get cards printed these days." He snorted. "That proves nothing." Tiffany, now closer than ever, zoomed in on the card. And then the words became crystal clear on the phones of thousands watching live. Dr. Jacqueline L. Spencer, Chief Executive Officer, First Dominion Bank. The shockwave spread like a silent explosion. Patricia Moore, the regional manager, turned pale. Her eyes locked onto the card, then back at Jacqueline, as if her brain was scrambling to verify her entire reality. "No. No way," Patricia stammered. "That can't be. Can't it?" Jacqueline replied, her voice as soft as a breeze, but sharp as silk-bladed steel. 2:59 p.m. On the large screen near the reception desk, Jason McAllen, the regional executive, was visibly unraveling. Someone at headquarters had whispered something into his ear, and now he looked visibly shaken, wrestling with his thoughts. Head of Security, Marcus Dean, had now fully realized who was standing before him. He raised his radio. "Security Command, this is Dean. Confirming Dr. Jacqueline Spencer is present in the main lobby." On the other end, a clear female voice responded. Ellen Roth. "Chief of Staff at First Dominion, the second most powerful person in the organization. After the CEO emergency directive, all staff stand down. Initiate Level 1 coordination protocol. Suspend all security operations immediately." Marcus lowered the radio and walked quickly to Jacqueline's side. For the first time that day, he bowed his head. "Our sincerest apologies, Dr. Spencer." Bradley had just shouted "one" when he froze upon seeing Marcus standing in front of him. His expression grave. "What are you doing?" Bradley asked, voice rising. "I'm stopping you from making another mistake," Marcus replied firmly. "Order from executive leadership. Order." "Who even is she?" Bradley yelled, still unwilling to believe what was unfolding. Jacqueline calmly retrieved the tablet from her briefcase. A quick fingerprint scan, and the screen lit up. The First Dominion executive portal appeared. Real-time financial dashboards, board meeting schedules, federal compliance reports, and the user ID J. Spencer at firstdominionhq.com. Role CEO. Tiffany held her breath. She zoomed in with her phone. Livestream viewers shot up 4156. OMG, Google her people. Jacqueline Spencer is the actual CEO. They just tried to kick out their own CEO. This is going down in history. The bank lobby fell into complete silence. Even the older customers, usually indifferent to social media, looked up, sensing the storm sweeping through. Bradley's face turned to stone. Sweat formed on his forehead, his lips trembling. At that moment, the main doors of the bank opened. 3 individuals in black suits walked in their steps, sharp and silent, like a special operations unit. Leading the group was Ellen Roth, followed by Maria Lannan, General Counsel, and James Carter, Chief Compliance Officer. The trio marched straight toward Jacqueline. Dr. Spencer. Ellen said clearly, her tone calm but commanding, "We apologize for the delay. The board meeting will be relocated to the 48th floor conference room in a few minutes." Bradley stood there with his mouth agape. He looked around as if searching for an invisible exit. Patricia stood frozen, speechless. Mrs. Ruth Langston, the elderly client, slowly approached Jacqueline and gently said, "Child, in 40 years banking. Here, I've never seen a reversal like this. You made me proud today." Jacqueline squeezed her hand lightly, her eyes reflecting true gratitude. Jason McAllen was still on screen, but his gaze had changed. Someone had clearly informed him of the unfolding events. He stammered, "Dr. Spencer, it appears there may have been some miscommunication regarding information." Jacqueline turned toward the screen, and for the first time, her gaze turned cold. "Mr. McAllen," she said, "we'll discuss the miscommunication in the emergency session. I suggest you prepare your justification." 2:59 p.m. The board meeting was scheduled for 3:30, but for Jacqueline L. Spencer, the time to act had already begun, and the history of First Dominion Bank was about to turn a page. 3:12 p.m. The main lobby of First Dominion Bank felt frozen in time. Every eye was fixed on the tablet in Dr. Jacqueline L. Spencer's hand, where the screen clearly displayed the bank's executive management portal, along with the verification line, "Jacqueline Spencer, Chief Executive Officer, active session." A chill ran down Bradley Knox's spine. That name was real. There was no denying it anymore. All the insults, the condescension, the performative authority had just come crashing down upon the very woman who ran this bank. At the same time, Tiffany's livestream had surpassed 5,000 viewers. Comments flooded in. "I'm screen recording this. Don't let this get lost." They just kicked out the CEO of her own bank. This is history. I love how she didn't get angry. She let the truth speak for itself. Marcus Dean, head of security, stood between Jacqueline and the offending employees. His eyes now showed no doubt, only respect. The main doors opened once more. 3 individuals in black attire entered, exuding the presence of people who weren't here to negotiate. Maria Lane, General Counsel, immediately began documenting everything with a tablet linked directly to the internal surveillance system. She scanned the lobby, then turned to Marcus. "Can you confirm this location has full camera coverage and audio?" "Yes. Continuous HD recording, stored for 90 days with audio," Marcus replied, firmly. "Perfect." Maria nodded. "We'll need a full data extract from the last 45 minutes, including employee names. POS login times all conversations and ambient audio." Bradley stood frozen, his body rigid, as if he'd just heard the first lines of his indictment. He glanced at Patricia Moore, the regional manager, who now looked as though she'd just been dragged into the light after years in the shadows. Patricia shakily approached Jacqueline, her voice noticeably softer. "Dr. Spencer, it seems there's been a misunderstanding. We were just trying to follow procedure." Jacqueline turned fully to face her. "What procedure instructs staff to call security on a customer asking to be served? We were concerned about suspicious activity," Patricia stammered. "And what exactly made you consider my presence suspicious?" The question rang out like cold steel. No need to raise her voice, everyone in the lobby heard it. Patricia couldn't respond. She hesitated, swallowing hard. There is no procedure that justifies risk assessment based on skin color and gender. Jacqueline placed the tablet on the counter, swiping several times to bring up new data. She called out James Carter. James, the chief compliance officer, stepped forward. "Yes, ma'am." "Read me the discrimination complaint figures from the past 6 months." James opened the file. "Yes, since January, the bank has received 82 complaints of discrimination across branches. Of those, 34 were from this location. Specifically, 17 named Bradley Knox as the employee who refused service or demanded proof of legal income without cause." The lobby went silent. Jacqueline, knotted eyes locked on Bradley. "So I'm not the first." Bradley was drenched in sweat. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. Jacqueline turned to Patricia Ms. Moore. "In your 12 years as a regional manager, have you ever asked a white client to explain their legal income when requesting premium services?" Patricia remained silent. "Never have you," Jacqueline answered for her. "No need to reply. I have the data." Patricia's face turned ghostly pale. 3:19 p.m. This had gone beyond a misunderstanding. This was now an organizational crisis. Jason McAllen's face remained on the video call, but his earlier confidence had evaporated. After hearing all the data just presented, he spoke, voice weakened. "Dr. Spencer, it appears we may need to handle this internally." Jacqueline cut in calmly but firmly. "Mr. McAllen, we'll handle this comprehensively and internally, starting with postponing the board meeting to 4 p.m. and converting it into an emergency session with full attendance from executive, legal, and internal control divisions." She picked up her tablet and sent a brief message. "Board meeting moved to 4 p.m. Emergency session." Mandatory attendance. Tiffany from a distance nearly gasped. Her viewer count now sat at 6,700 and rising. A few reporters had already started messaging her requesting permission to use the live stream footage. "I've never seen a crisis handled this professionally. She doesn't need to yell just facts and truth. Someone please tell me this CEO had military training. Every move feels like a battle tactic." At that moment, Marcus Dean turned to Jacqueline. "Dr. Spencer, would you like me to escort the involved individuals to the conference room?" Jacqueline nodded. "Yes, Mr. Knox and Ms. Moore will attend the session. They'll need to explain their procedures, in front of the full board. Bradley nearly collapsed. Patricia's face had turned the color of ash. From a silent interpreter of justice, Jacqueline had become a living indictment, leading the entire institution into an internal tribunal where justice was no longer a slogan, but a concrete, deliberate act. 3:55 p.m. 48th floor executive boardroom of First Dominion Bank. Inside the room lined with polished mahogany and wrapped in glass windows overlooking the Houston skyline, 12 large chairs around the table were all occupied. These were the most powerful figures in the entire banking system, but today all were silent. At the head of the table, David Sterling, chairman of the board, a white man in his 60s, with neatly trimmed silver hair, gently tapped the wooden gavel on the table. "We are commencing the emergency session at 4:00 p.m. today," he said, his voice heavy. "Subject addressing the serious incident that occurred at our flagship branch." Dr. Jacqueline L. Spencer entered the room precisely at 4:00 p.m. Following her were Bradley Knox and Patricia Moore, both looking like they had just stepped out of a nightmare. Vacant eyes, slumped shoulders, hands awkwardly dangling without direction. Also accompanying her were Ellen Roth, Maria Lane, and James Carter, the three representing the Rapid Response Unit activated less than an hour ago. Jacqueline did not take her seat immediately. She placed her tablet on the table and connected it to the presentation system. The main screen switched to a live analytics dashboard. The first headline appeared, Media and Social Impact as of 4:00 p.m. Instagram Live viewers, 9 to 8:47, Twitter mentions hashtag First Dominion, Bank 47,000 in 2 hours, Facebook shares, 12,000, and rising YouTube uploads of the incident, 23 different channels. A chill swept through the room. Several board members lowered their heads. One person muttered, "My God." Board member Catherine Liu, head of the Risk Oversight Committee, sat upright. "Dr. Spencer, please walk us through the incident directly." Jacqueline nodded. She played a segment extracted from the security footage, synchronized perfectly with Tiffany's livestream recording. The entire room watched the full incident unfold, from Jessica directing Jacqueline to the regular customer counter, to Bradley's tone, the questions about legal income, and even the moment he counted down 5 minutes and called security, all without knowing he was expelling the CEO from her own bank. When the video ended, the boardroom fell into 30 seconds of absolute silence. Robert Chen, a longtime board member, whispered so softly it was almost inaudible, "Jesus." Maria Lane stood up and presented, "We have sufficient legal grounds to conclude that the actions of Mr. Bradley Knox and Miss Patricia Moore violated at least 3 federal statutes, including the Fair Housing Act of 1968, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977, given the current evidence we are facing, a potential class action lawsuit, possible administrative penalties from the FDIC, loss of community and investor trust, uncontainable media fallout." She displayed the next slide, estimated damages if the issue goes unaddressed. Potential fines, $50,000, $500, $1,000 per violation. Class action exposure, 15 mm, 50 mm. Reputation loss immeasurable. Bradley began, trembling. He stood up and spoke in a pleading tone. I was just following procedure. I didn't know it was her. I thought she was not a suitable client." Jacqueline's expression didn't change. She waited for him to finish, then calmly asked, "What did you think, Mr. Knox? That a black woman in a suit couldn't be a VIP client?" He started to say something, but nothing came out. Patricia Moore attempted to salvage. "We're under pressure to prevent money laundering. We were just being cautious." Maria Lane. In 12 years of employment, you have never asked a white client to prove income before offering premium services. But with black clients, there are dozens of cases of enhanced screening. Data doesn't lie, Ms. Moore. James Carter displayed the next statistical chart: average service time, white clients, 4.2 minutes, black clients, 12.7 minutes, requests for additional documentation. White clients, 47%, black clients, 83%. Time security was called for suspicious behavior in the past 12 months. What's total incidents, 67. Of those involving black clients, 59. The boardroom was no longer a discussion space, it had become the courtroom of the institution itself. Jacqueline turned to David Sterling, the chairman of the board. "We're facing a historic decision. Either we acknowledge that racism is embedded in our organizational culture, or we rebuild from the ground up." Sterling nodded. "Dr. Spencer, what do you propose?" Jacqueline didn't hesitate. 3 options. Deny, handle it internally, hope the storm passes. Minimize, fire a few people. Offer retraining, issue a public apology. Reform entirely. Rewrite the corporate culture, overhaul procedures, invest in equity. She looked at each board member, then said, "This wasn't a mistake. It was a symptom of a systemic culture. And if we don't uproot it, it will happen again." Catherine Liu straightened. "I vote for option 3. One by one, hands were raised. When it came to the final vote, Chairman Sterling, he nodded, "I agree. The board is unanimous. 12-0, full reform, no opposition." 4:38 p.m. A bank had just officially entered a new era, not with a press release, but with the courage to face the truth. 4:45 p.m. Inside the executive boardroom on the 48th floor of First Dominion Bank, a decision had been made. 12 hands raised a unanimous vote for full reform. But for Dr. Jacqueline L. Spencer, this was only the beginning. She stood up, opened her leather briefcase, and for the first time that day, revealed its full contents. Everything was arranged with chilling precision. Federal compliance reports, strategic reform plans, letters of recommendation from DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion experts, and a CEO badge printed with the First Dominion logo and her name, Dr. Jacqueline L. Spencer, Chief Executive Officer. She took the badge and pinned it onto her blazer in front of the very people who had dismissed her presence in the lobby less than 2 hours earlier. Across the table, Bradley Knox looked completely drained of color. His hands trembled, sweat dripping down his collar. He knew there was no walking this back. Jacqueline turned to Marcus Dean, head of security. Her voice was soft, yet sharp as a blade. "Mr. Dean, please escort Mr. Knox and Ms. Moore to the executive floor. They will attend the extended session to provide testimony before Legal HR and the Ethics Oversight Committee." At once Marcus nodded. Bradley jumped up about to say something, but Jacqueline cut him off. "You have the right to speak, but words don't redeem actions, and your actions have caused millions to question the core of our organizational culture." Patricia Moore said nothing. She followed Marcus quietly, her head lowered each step like a written confession. 4:49 p.m. Jacqueline entered a command on her tablet, sending an urgent message to the entire banking system: internal memo initiating Phase 1 of the Organizational Culture Reform Plan. All branch directors are to join an online meeting at 6:00 p.m. Materials will be sent through internal channels. Catherine Liu, from across the table, asked Dr. Spencer, "What's your plan for client engagement and community outreach?" Jacqueline displayed the next slide. First Dignity Program, retraining all branch-level employees within 30 days on service equity values. First Watch app, a tool allowing clients and employees to anonymously report discriminatory behavior securely connected to the CEO's office and legal. Community Investment Fund launching with $500,000 to support businesses founded by women and people of color with free financial advisory services. And she added, "We will implement quarterly bias audits by a third party with results made public. We won't just fix this. We'll set a new standard. Robert Chen, historically the most conservative board member, spoke in agreement for the first time. "The way you've turned a crisis into a systemic turning point. I haven't seen anything like it in 30 years in finance." Jacqueline simply nodded. 5:23 p.m. The official termination notices were issued. Bradley Knox, contract terminated immediately for violating ethics policy, engaging in discriminatory behavior, and unprofessional crisis handling. Patricia Moore, suspended pending termination review, recommended for cultural rehabilitation training. Jason McAllen, regional director, summoned for disciplinary hearing due to enabling discriminatory conduct. Temporarily stripped of operational authority pending internal investigation. All actions were formally stated as authorized by the current CEO. 6:00 p.m. As night fell over Houston, the entire First Dominion system entered an extended online session, an unprecedented move in the bank's history. On the Zoom call were over 300 people, branch managers, department heads, regional leaders. Jacqueline opened the session with a single sentence. "Today one of our clients was humiliated, and that person was me." No long introductions, no sugarcoating. She spoke of truth, of behavior, of systems. "We cannot call this an isolated incident when the numbers clearly show a systemic issue. And as CEO, I declare, if the system won't change, I will change everyone running it." The Zoom screen fell silent. Not out of fear, but out of respect. She then outlined the complete reform plan, rebuilding a customer-first culture grounded in mutual respect, tying leadership performance metrics to equity indicators, establishing a community oversight council with the power to call emergency sessions. The final moment of the meeting brought hundreds of attendees to tears, even those not easily moved. Jacqueline shared her screen and replayed the moment when Bradley counted down and called security, stopping at the still frame where she stood silently placing her briefcase on the counter without a single outburst. "I wasn't angry, not because I was weak, but because I already had a plan. Today, I didn't retaliate. I simply delivered the truth." 8:00 p.m. Downstairs in the lobby, where a CEO had once been humiliated, the floor was being cleaned and prepped for a press conference the following morning. On the glass reception desk, a new sign was placed. "Here every customer is treated with dignity and fairness, no exceptions." Mrs. Ruth Langston, the elderly customer, was still sitting in her usual waiting chair, smiling softly, as if she'd lived long enough to finally see justice stop being a dream. 7:55 a.m. Wednesday. The Texas sunlight sliced through the towering glass panes of First Dominion Bank's headquarters, casting brilliant streaks across the marble lobby. Less than 24 hours earlier, this place had been the scene of such blatant, clumsy discrimination that it made the entire nation pause and watch. But this morning, the atmosphere was entirely different. In the center of the main lobby, the very spot where Dr. Jacqueline L. Spencer was asked yesterday to prove her legal income and nearly escorted out by security, now stood a media podium bearing a banner from apology to action. First Dominion redefines equity in finance. Behind the podium were media representatives, reporters, local news stations, and several civic organizations. Many were there simply to witness the woman who had turned a moment of injustice into a historic turning point. Jacqueline appeared at 8:00 a.m. sharp, stepping out of the executive elevator from the 48th floor, followed by Ellen Roth and Maria Lane. She wore a navy blue suit, neat, understated, but emanating the presence of someone who had led a dozen emergency meetings in just one night. Waiting ahead was Jessica, the young teller who had said the regular counter is over there the day before. Her eyes were filled with worry. Jacqueline paused, smiled gently, and said quietly, "Jessica, you weren't wrong yesterday. You acted just as you were trained to. The problem is, we need better training." Jessica burst into tears, not from shame but from emotion. In her eyes now was a new resolve to make sure no one ever approached her counter, feeling like they didn't belong. After a few minutes of preparation, the press conference began, Jacqueline stepped up to the podium, no script, no cue cards, just herself, and the truth. I'm Jacqueline L. Spencer, Chief Executive Officer of this bank. And yesterday I was doubted, dismissed, and nearly removed by my own system. I'm not here to reclaim my personal dignity. I'm here to reclaim the dignity of every customer who has ever been judged solely by their appearance. Cameras zoomed in. Her voice echoed through the space, resolute and unwavering. I don't need special treatment because I'm the CEO. I need this system to treat everyone fairly, even those who've never stepped into a bank before. Hundreds of eyes fixed on her. Some reporters scribbled notes furiously. Others couldn't write, they just listened in silence. We will not apologize through a social media post. We will apologize through action. Immediately after the conference, Jacqueline invited the press to tour the changes already implemented overnight. The Customer Experience Observation Unit had been deployed to major branches, dressed in neutral uniforms, unarmed, tasked solely with observing how clients are treated. The First Watch app, officially launched at midnight already, won 700 downloads in just 8 hours, with over 150 reports submitted, including 32 praising positive staff behavior. The message, "Dignity has no exception," was printed and posted at every branch, directly behind the teller desks, in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, ensuring every community felt welcome. 9:15 a.m. As the media packed up, Jacqueline walked to the VIP lounge where Mrs. Ruth Langston had been waiting since early morning, like a loyal witness to history. "You came early." Jacqueline smiled. "You think I'd miss this?" Ruth grinned. "My husband helped build the first branch of this bank. But yesterday, I saw who's really building its future." Jacqueline sat beside her and gently took her hand. "You know, Ruth, sometimes what we need most isn't power. It's someone willing to stand still in silence, with truth on their side." Ruth nodded, her aged eyes glowing with trust. "You've made me believe in this bank again." On social media, Tiffany Lee, the woman who had inadvertently captured the historic live stream, posted a photo of Jacqueline standing at the podium with the caption, "Yesterday they called her unqualified. Today she's rewriting the rules of an entire industry." The post garnered 38,000 shares in 6 hours. Tiffany's follower count surged past 110,000, and she was officially invited to become a community correspondent for Houston Local 9. 10:00 a.m. At the internal morning meeting, Jacqueline announced a new initiative. "We will host monthly community forums open to all clients to hear what the banking system cannot say for itself." Because change doesn't come from the boardroom. It comes from the voices we've ignored. That morning, the bank did more than apologize. It began again. It did what most powerful institutions fear: admitted it was wrong and got to work fixing it. But the most beautiful moment wasn't the reform itself. It was when Jacqueline walked out of the lobby, smiling at every staff member and every customer, as if everyone was VIP. No income proof required, no expensive suit needed, just humanity. 11:00 a.m. same day. Executive Office, 48th floor. Soft light streamed through the massive glass windows, bathing the walnut desk, where Dr. Jacqueline L. Spencer sat, her fingers gliding across her tablet screen. On the screen was a real-time data dashboard showing community feedback. Reports submitted through the First Watch app were coming in constantly just overnight. Over 300 submissions had been logged. Among them, 78% were positive feedback about newly trained frontline staff. 12% flagged areas needing improvement. 10% were emotional testimonials from customers who had previously faced discrimination. One report was tagged. Important from a longtime customer named Aisha Reynolds, a black nurse who had banked with First Dominion for 15 years. "I was once denied a business account for lack of strong credit history, despite bringing full accounting documents. Today, I returned to the same branch I was greeted, kindly called by name, invited to sit, and treated without suspicion. I cried from the emotion. Jacqueline set the tablet down. Her eyes lifted, seeing not numbers, but real people behind every data point. 11:15 a.m. A call came through from the Texas State Banking Oversight Committee. Spencer came the voice of a middle-aged man through the speaker. "This is Christopher Mahoney, Deputy Director of the committee." "Good morning, Mr. Mahoney," Jacqueline replied, steady and composed. "We wanted to commend First Dominion for your swift and comprehensive response. We've received over 50 letters from customers in just 24 hours, all confirming that the change feels genuine, not performative." "Thank you," Jacqueline said, "but we've only taken the first few steps." "And you've taken them in the right direction," Mahoney affirmed. "We will postpone the scheduled administrative review and instead propose First Dominion as a participant in the Community Equity Banking Pilot Program, where your reform policies will be monitored as a model." Jacqueline smiled. A small beam of light, but a real one. 12:30 p.m. Executive Dining Room, 47th floor. Key members of the reform team: Ellen Roth, Maria Lena, James Carter, and HR representatives gathered around the table. Jacqueline entered, carrying a printed copy of the 90-day implementation roadmap. On the board, Weeks 1-2, emergency training for all frontline employees, Weeks 3-6, establish community advisory councils in major cities, Weeks 7-8, launch no bias at the door program, evaluating unconscious staff behaviors. Weeks 9-10, conduct first, third-party audit, Weeks 11-12, publish full transparency report on bank's official website. Ellen looked up. "You really plan to put all of this online?" Jacqueline nodded. "If it's not public, it's not reform. It's cover-up." Maria chuckled, a rare gesture. "You're making me rethink what leadership really means." That afternoon in Southside Houston, a small group gathered in a local community center when the bank's representatives arrived. Leading the group was Clarence Boone, a retired pastor and financial justice advocate. "Is she here yet?" he asked. An employee smiled. "She didn't send a rep. She's coming herself." A few minutes later, Jacqueline walked in, no entourage, no fanfare. Clarence stood gripping her hand firmly. "Dr. Spencer, the woman this whole country is talking about." Jacqueline smiled. "I'm not here to talk. I'm here to listen." The dialogue lasted nearly 2 hours, where residents shared stories of being denied loans despite having collateral, being asked for excessive income verification, or being quietly redirected to a more appropriate desk. Jacqueline didn't offer excuses or justifications. She simply nodded and replied to each person, "I believe you." Before leaving, she stood and addressed the room. "Today, I make this promise. This bank won't just exist in the community. It will serve the community. If someone like me, they could be excluded, then anyone can. And we won't let that happen again." 5:00 p.m. Back in her office, Jacqueline sat alone. On her desk was a handwritten note from Jessica, the young teller. "Dr. Spencer yesterday was the biggest lesson of my life. Thank you for not treating me as part of the problem, but as part of the solution. I want to learn. I want to be part of a new generation of banking." Jacqueline smiled. She picked up a pen and wrote a response beneath. "You've already started, Jessica. Don't fear relearning. Those who dare to correct themselves are the ones worthy of leading." That evening at home, Jacqueline turned on the TV. A special report aired on CNN, "From Humiliation to Reform: How a Black CEO Transformed Banking in 24 Hours." Her image filled the screen not as a victim, but as a true leader. Jacqueline quietly turned the TV off. There was no need to replay it. She didn't live to become a symbol. She lived to make transformation real. Thursday morning, 8:00 a.m. 2 days after the Jacqueline Spencer incident, the headquarters of First Dominion Bank looked entirely different. The marble floors still gleamed. The chandeliers still hung high. But now what impressed was no longer the materials or architecture, but the people. Next to every teller station now stood a customer equity advocate, newly hired employees recruited from underrepresented communities. Their role was not to supervise, but to ensure every customer felt heard the moment they walked in. Jacqueline arrived in the lobby at 8:15 a.m. unannounced, without an entourage. At window number 3, she saw a brown-skinned man hesitating a stack of papers, trembling in his hands. A new employee name tag Luis approached him with a warm, genuine smile. "Good morning, sir. How can I help you today?" Jacqueline stood a few steps back, silently observing. The man nervously handed over a small business loan application, eyes downcast, as if accustomed to rejection. But Luis didn't look at his clothes or his tone. He sat down, gestured toward a seat, and said, "Let's start with your goal. A corner grocery in your neighborhood." "That's fantastic." Jacqueline smiled. It was a quiet victory, but the kind of victory she valued most, a victory of attitude. 10:30 a.m. In the CEO's office, Jacqueline led a special meeting with regional directors from across the country, over 30 faces gathered on an internal Zoom call, expressions serious yet attentive. "We're going to talk metrics," she began, "but not profit metrics, trust metrics." She shared internal statistics from the First Watch reporting system. Positive feedback rate after 2 days of reform, 82.6%. Number of employees who voluntarily signed up for bias training, 2 to 413. Customer return rate after a discriminatory experience, 56%, up from 11% previously. This isn't PR. This is a biological response of the organization. Jacqueline said, looking each face in the eye through the screen. "We thought customers would turn away because of the scandal. But they didn't turn away. They came back when they saw us own our mistakes and change." A director from Seattle raised his hand. "I had a white client ask why we're prioritizing equity over speed. I told him, because fast service without fairness is just a band-aid over a societal fracture." Heads nodded across the board. Jacqueline smiled to herself. This was the culture she had long envisioned. That afternoon, 3:30 p.m., Jacqueline received a private call from the Federal Community Advisory Board. The chairwoman, Dr. Alicia Monroe, a veteran policy expert in finance and social equity, was calling to confirm an invitation. "We'd like to formally invite you to serve as policy advisor on financial equity to the Federal Council, helping develop new industry-wide banking standards." Jacqueline paused for a few seconds, not from hesitation, but from emotion. "I never thought one day someone would ask me to help write the rules, after I myself was once questioned for even having the right to be served." Dr. Monroe replied calmly, "That's exactly why we need you. You don't speak of equity from theory. You've walked through it in your own skin." 5:00 p.m. While most employees were preparing to head home, Jacqueline held a private internal meeting for employees who had once been underestimated, judged by first impressions. She invited Jessica Luis, an Asian American employee named Hannah, a transgender staff member named Elijah, and even Marcus Dean, the head of security, who had once failed to recognize her as CEO. "None of you are perfect," Jacqueline began, "but you are the embodiment of what's changing here. And I want you to join the Reform Advisory Team, not because of your degrees, but because you understand silence, discomfort, and the anger that has no voice." Everyone was moved. Marcus spoke slowly. "I've worked in security for 23 years. But yesterday I learned discipline isn't enough to create justice if we lack awareness." That night, in her private apartment on the 32nd floor of a high-rise building, Jacqueline sat alone with a cup of herbal tea. No more meeting lights, no more keyboard clicks, just her and the gentle stillness of the evening. She opened her laptop and began typing the first line of her keynote for the upcoming National Banking Conference, "Equity is not a privilege. It's the bare minimum that any civilized system must guarantee to all its people. Below, she wrote, "If I, a black woman, CEO of a bank, can still be kicked out of the very institution I lead, what does that say about those who hold no power at all?" She paused. No need to write more. Her story had already written itself. On Tiffany's Instagram, a new caption had just gone up. "I once filmed a CEO being humiliated. Today, I returned to the same place and saw a culture reborn." 6 months later, a gentle spring morning, sunlight streamed through the tall glass windows of First Dominion Bank's main lobby, the place that had witnessed one of the most dramatic downfalls and turnarounds in American financial history. Inside the lobby, there were no live stream cameras, no curious crowds. Yet everything still carried a strange sense of reverence. On the large wall behind the reception desk was a new bronze plaque, engraved with the words, "Every customer who walks through these doors deserves respect, not because of position, wealth, or appearance, but because they are human." In the far right corner stood a touchscreen First Watch kiosk designed for any customer to submit feedback, compliments, or report misconduct with just a few taps. Next to it hung a black and white photograph of Jacqueline Spencer standing at the press podium with a short caption, "The woman who turned humiliation into reform." Inside the 48th floor boardroom, once the site where Bradley and Patricia were dismissed, now hosted quarterly open community forums attended by real customers, small business owners, civil society reps, and economics students alike. Today's topic: how does an organization never forget who it exists for? Jacqueline sat beside Ruth Langston, the 79-year-old woman who had witnessed the original incident from the lobby bench. Ruth now served as honorary advisor to the Customer Ethics Council, a role Jacqueline personally offered her. "You know," Ruth said, gazing down through the glass at the lobby below, "in my whole life I never thought I'd see a bank apologize to a customer, let alone to an old woman like me." Jacqueline smiled. "We don't need perfect banks. We need people willing to learn from their mistakes." Across the entire First Dominion system, all 186 branches had completed mandatory unconscious bias training, 40 hours per employee. According to an independent survey by the National Institute of Financial Services, customer satisfaction had increased 127% year over year. The highest growth came from customers who had historically been least trusted people of color, transgender clients, immigrants, and the elderly. Business account openings for women and minority-owned businesses had risen 89% following the launch of the Community Investment Fund. And perhaps the most surprising success, staff turnover, dropped by 76%, a figure most organizations could only dream of in the post-pandemic world. No one was forced to stay. They stayed because they saw a system willing to correct itself. Meanwhile, Jacqueline Spencer had been invited to speak at over 40 conferences on banking finance leadership and social justice across the U.S., from Stanford University to the Brookings Institute. But her most acclaimed speech was at the annual conference of the American Bankers Association, titled "From Hallway to Boardroom: A Journey Back to the Place That Once Rejected Me." In that speech, she said, "Equity is not an excuse to silence mistakes. It's the reason to begin again, stronger, truer, and more just. I don't ask for forgiveness for what my staff did that day. I ask to be judged not only by how I was treated, but by how we responded afterward." The hall rose to a standing ovation. Even industry rivals and investors admitted she had redefined what leadership meant. Bradley Knox, the man who once shouted 5 minutes in the lobby, had completed the 6-month Community Awareness Rehabilitation Program, a concept Jacqueline herself initiated. He now worked at a nonprofit in New Orleans, helping individuals who had faced financial discrimination access loans and understand their rights. In a video testimonial produced by the organization, Bradley looked directly into the camera. "I'm not proud of my past. But if Dr. Spencer could forgive me, then I have no excuse not to relearn how to be human. Tiffany Lee, the student who had accidentally live-streamed the original event, was now a community journalist for a major news network. Her Instagram had nearly 1 million followers, but the thing she was proudest of wasn't the number. It was a handwritten letter from Jacqueline, which read, "Sometimes you don't know. You're recording history, until history. Thanks you for not putting the camera down." And then, one day, a 9-year-old girl named Naomi came into the bank with her mother, carrying a pink piggy bank. She placed it on the counter shyly. "I want to open a savings account." The teller leaned down, smiling. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Naomi Spencer." The teller looked up, surprised. "Are you related to CEO Spencer?" "She's my mom." Naomi said, her eyes shining like stars. The teller nodded gently. "Then today, we'll start this together, just like your mom helped start again for so many others." And that is how one woman once escorted out of the very bank she ran, turned humiliation into legacy. A story that began with prejudice and ended with a system reborn through truth, courage, and the belief that one person may not change the world. But if they dare to stand still when everyone else turns away, they might just change the place that once turned away from them. And so Jacqueline Spencer's story comes to a close, from a CEO thrown out of her own bank to the woman who led an entire institution to transform from the roots up. If this story moved you, and if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit like and subscribe so you won't miss more stories of justice, resilience, and hope like this one. We'll see you in the next journey, where truth speaks louder than noise, and ordinary people still do extraordinary things. In the meantime, we've picked a few other stories we think you'll love. They're waiting for you right next door. Have a peaceful day, and may you always be seen for your true worth.